Hello and welcome back to Off the Shelf Reviews. And today we're going to do something slightly different. We're going to talk about two films. We're going to talk about The Raid, Redemption and Dredd. Both films came out in 2012 and they both came out within weeks of each other. And thematically they're very similar. So we're going to discuss both films at the same time and kind of discuss which films maybe did things better or worse than the other. So, Iain, why don't you start by telling us the plot of Dredd?
Well, the plot for Dredd is your simple, apocalyptic future. The judges run the law enforcement of Mega City 1, and Carl Urban, who plays Dredd very brilliantly in this film, I must say, is sent with a new partner, Anderson, to the large block. I can't remember what the block was called. It was Peach Trees or something?
That's right, yeah.
Peach Trees block to arrest a bunch of drug dealers. They inadvertently go in there and they get locked in and violence ensues.
Lots of violence.
Lots of violence.
So, why don't you contrast with the plot of The Raid?
Yeah.
Well, The Raid is almost exactly the same plot, essentially, except instead of just having a judge and his partner,
Yep.
You've got a whole massive crew of SWAT, like Indonesian police. And they all go into the building with the express intent of taking out the big boss at the top of this tenement tower.
Yep.
But there's one main character who seems to be leading the charge and responsible for the operation, and nobody else is really clued into the politics of why it's happening.
But inadvertently they get locked in and violence ensues.
Absolutely, yeah.
Gratuitous
that
violence.
bit's exactly the same. But it's two very different types of violence, and even though these two films have exactly the same plot, they approach it in two very entirely different ways, and they're coming from two entirely different premises in terms of what the main film, like the world that the film is set in. So Dredd is sci-fi, whereas The Raid is Indonesian, like modern day real life.
Yeah, starting with Dredd, I mean, coming off of Sly Stallone's Judge Dredd, it does the story of Dredd very, very well.
Well, I guess the first thing everyone wanted to know when they said they were going to remake Dredd was, is he going to take off his fucking helmet? Because if he's going to take off his helmet, I'm not watching it.
Wow,
But, I mean, I hate to hate on Stallone's Judge Dredd movie, but it is a slight guilty pleasure of a film to watch.
Yes.
Just because it's so bad.
Holy crud. He's a sitting duck out there.
He knows what he's doing.
I am the law.
It's so bad, but it had a hell of a budget, and there were some parts of it that did capture the essence of the Judge Dredd universe, not the Judge Dredd character.
No,
So,
that's true.
It's a shame that flopped, and it's a shame what they attempted.
Well,
and it's so good that what they've done now with Dredd, they've actually stripped away all of the nonsense and just gone with a simple concept story existing in the Dredd universe.
Yeah. I mean, they started off very easily. It's just, Mega City 1, this is Judge Dredd's home turf. And as soon as the opening starts with him riding the bike, chasing those birds, you're hoping for lots of violence. And it comes in a lot of forms. The cinematography for the... Try not to spoil too much, but obviously there's drugs being built inside the tenement block that Judge Dredd is going inside to get. A drug called slow-mo, which...
It's gotta be the best drug on the market. I mean, that's the slow motion effect just is amazing.
Yeah,
the cinematography captures that feeling, and it that amazing sequence where they burst into that den.
Breach and clear, yeah.
The breach and clear. And the way the camera just slowly pans and you see all the particle effects of the blood.
Yeah.
Sometimes the colours looked a little bit out of sync with the rest of the film.
Well, yeah, CGI.
But it was so colourful and so bright and vivid, and the detail was in every single shot.
Yeah.
The cinematography for Dredd was absolutely fantastic.
The brilliance of Dredd himself is that Carl Urban spent many weeks training with the Los Angeles SWAT teams to learn how to breach and clear a room and move from cover to cover, covering his partner's back. And that comes across in the film very well done. I mean, his partner, Anderson, plays the rookie very, very well.
Yes, yeah. That was the best thing for me about Dredd, was the chemistry between Dredd and Anderson, their kind of interplay with each other.
Yeah.
It's very short, quippy lines that say a lot. And Dredd, also as an actor, not being able to show his expression through the top of his face, emotes an awful lot through his chin.
Through the chin.
And sometimes he emotes an awful lot without even saying a word. And that was some serious acting. He pulled that off. And I really loved the chemistry between the two of them, where he was at odds with her. You know, to him, she was substandard. She wasn't worthy enough to be a judge.
Yeah.
And throughout the film, he's kind of guiding her through this shitstorm of bullets and blood. How this is day-to-day life.
Take it this is your first time in non-sim combat.
Yes, sir.
I'm wondering when you'd remember you left your helmet behind.
Sir, a helmet can interfere with my psychic abilities.
Think a bullet might interfere with them more.
And I love the fact that she wants to make a difference. She's from the rough neighborhood.
Yeah.
He kind of says it's kind of admirable that she still thinks she can make a difference, where he's, a lifer. He's driven by this.
It's his bread and butter.
It doesn't matter whether he makes a difference or not, he takes the bad guys down. So when we go to the raid, the central character is not really on that kind of mission. He's kind of doing his job.
Yeah.
And there's a really great scene where the film felt to me like a bit like Rainbow Six. I actually felt like they were a squad. They had tactics. They did all of this hand signals. They had the right gear and equipment.
That's the raid we're talking about now.
Yeah, the raid. And so, in contrast of just having the two agents go into the building, we have a squad of 15 to 20 or more troops. So, in a way, straight away, I thought, cannon fodder. We're going to see lots of guys getting killed in this film.
Yeah, we did.
and we do. But it was the strategic elements of the way, that they get taken out. It's the combat situations, not so much the martial arts, which comes later in the film, but the gun battles.
Yeah.
And talking about the stylistics of Dredd being very good, the raid has one sequence that was phenomenal to watch, and it's another scene where they're getting ready to breach and clear a room. The door handle is slowly twisting open, and the other guy can see, or he's looking up, and all he can see is blackness.
Yeah.
But he just kind of knows that they're up there. And the guy opens the door and he fires off one shotgun round, and the film goes in slow motion where you see that blast go, and it just gives an aura glow around them, and all the guys at the top just see that glow, and then it creates that silhouette shadow across the wall.
Boom, kicks off.
And kicks off
The
royally.
cinematography for both films is on par. I mean, I came this week ready to watch The Raid, thinking, I've seen all this kind of before. I've seen it in Ong Bak, I've seen it in, Kung Fu Hustle, where just one guy manages to take out 20 or 30 guys, just with his fist. But it was the build up to that, along with Dredd, where they just, both films where they just move into the house, move into the apartment block, and they take everybody down. They're locking them all down, and they're just, and you're just running with the camera, following them shoulder for shoulder.
I was going to say, I'm going to have to chuck in a contrasting view. For me, you see, with Dredd, the cinematography really hinged around those sparkly slow-mo bits. And a few big scenes with some big sort of guns going off and lots of debris flying everywhere.
Minigun on the side of
that. That is possibly one of my most memorable scenes of Dredd, is that big scene. So it's really, really American and Hollywood. Loads of big guns.
Very bombastic.
Yes.
Whereas The Raid for me was much more a kind of, like you say, those devastating, epic gun battles right at the beginning, where people were just getting off left, right, and centre on both sides. And you've got this real sense of drama and action that accompanies those battles. But the cinematography for me is what stands those two apart. The cinematography in The Raid, where you've got these fantastic panning, running camera shots, which are go alongside fantastic choreography, alongside amazing special effects for the gore. And like with Dredd, the gore seems to be, quite muted in some ways, except for those moments where you've got the slow-mo, and then they really embellish on it.
Well, not all of it.
They embellish and glamorise it.
The budget for both films, I mean, with Dredd, they had a big budget, they had the big name stars. With The Raid, it's an Indonesian film, they're not going to have that much money, but they work with what they've got. And I got from both films that everybody acting in the film put their hearts into it.
Both films, yeah. But I agree that the cinematography for The Raid is elevated more so, but that's because after the gunplay, the film dissolves or changes into a martial arts epic. And when you've got such fantastic martial artists kicking the crap out of each other, the cinematography has to be on par with them to keep up with them, and knowing when they've rehearsed these scenes, they know where to put the camera and they get to play with it in such a magnificent way. Whereas Dredd, it's all about the gunplay. There isn't any fights or martial arts sequences, so the camera at least is pulled back a little bit. And so credit to both films. In the action sequences in both films, the camera wasn't too close. It was back far enough so that you could see all of the action. You never missed a beat. And to do that in a martial arts film like The Raid is phenomenal. It really is. And so you feel every punch, every knife wound, every cracked rib. It's accentuated by that soundtrack. It's so rough.
There's definitely a soundtrack where they're putting punch and stab sounds over the top. But the way they've combined, and with the music as well, crescendos up as the battle gets like tougher and tougher, and he goes on to harder and harder bad guys. The music brings you along with the fight. And then there are so many moments in The Raid where you go, oh, or ooh, and like you proper wince. Because there's those classic death scenes on both sides, and whereas with Dredd, you've only really got a couple of really like momentous deaths in Dredd. Whereas the rest sort of passes by without much.
On one
drama.
hand, in Dredd, you have got Dredd himself using his intelligence and his physique and body to take down this whole building. In The Raid, you just have Rama, the main guy, beating the shit out of everybody to get to where he's going. And the problem I have with The Raid is that I've seen this many times before. I've seen a lot of martial arts kung fu movies in my time, and it's just another one of those films where they go in there and they have these epic scenes, and then there's just this one guy. And regardless, if you've seen many films like this, this guy's coming out at the end.
Let's face it, neither film though has anything particularly original in format.
No, they're both Die Hard with lots of blood and guts.
It's a modern day version of a standard cop action film with bells and whistles, except Dredd is sci-fi, and Dredd is based on the 2000 AD comics, 2000 AD comics, which that's the problem, I think, for me with Dredd, is the story format doesn't lend itself well, or it's very kind of like restricted and a little bit fearful of what really 2000 AD was all about. For me, 2000 AD and the Judge Dredd comic concepts are about this huge, sprawling metropolis dystopia, where we've got to a situation where society is so debased that they literally can't even have a standard cop force anymore. They have to have individual judges that is judge and jury in that moment. Boom!
They had to keep it constrained to Dredd himself, because obviously we already spoke with Stallone's Judge Dredd movie.
Well,
that expands across this massive city, even out into the desert, and it was just too much. With Dredd,
look at something
Dredd,
like Blade Runner. You know, like Blade Runner.
I saw a lot of nods to Blade Runner in Dredd.
Well, there were little nods, but I wanted to see a much bigger. I wanted to see Blade Runner taking it, like, expanded on even better in the Dredd universe with Dredd.
Not going
being
too
a
much
badass.
into the history of Blade Runner. Blade Runner was a very difficult movie.
That was a detective film.
You know,
It's true. It's a different kind of
Yeah.
film, and Blade Runner has a totally different ethos. But that huge sprawling metropolis,
universe.
the ambition
Yeah.
of creating the universe.
Why not explore it some more?
Yeah,
Why
why didn't
not
we have that
confine
in
it?
Dredd?
But obviously, like I said,
No, I think it's a stepping stone for Dredd, because I think they do want to make more movies.
Yeah,
in
they
this
want to make it
universe.
in a
They want to make a
trilogy.
trilogy.
Yeah.
Carl Urban's, he's still up for doing it. But it's just whether it's successful or not to make the money back.
Yeah.
Whether people, it's testing the waters to see if people actually want to see this.
That's the
And
feeling
that's a
I
good
got.
thing. If the film has done that to you, then that's good, because it's made you want more.
That's the funny thing, because that's another similarity between the two films, because Judge Dredd, with Dredd, they want to make a trilogy.
Dredd is a franchise.
Expanding the stories of Dredd and Anderson and
Could be.
all of the other judges and all the enemies that they come across. And where in the Raid, the Raid is actually a part of a trilogy already. The director, Evan,
Something Hugh Evans.
he's actually done a film already, and the Raid was actually the second one in the trilogy, and he actually wants to make a third one. And that's one of the pros and cons with Asian films, is that they don't get the advertisement and the throw out that Dredd did.
Yeah.
Like we said, they both came out within a few weeks, and I saw a trailer for the Raid on TV and was like, what the hell's that? And then I didn't see it again until I saw it on DVD in a popular supermarket. Where Dredd, I saw trailer after trailer after trailer on the internet, on TV, and then everybody wanted to go see it in the cinema. And Asian films should get that big push.
Yeah.
But not everybody wants to see two or three guys beating the crap out of each other in a small room.
Well, but I think there are enough people that do, and would rather see that than a comic book film that
we're saturated with
that
right now.
we're saturated with, especially right now.
Well, that's it. But that's going into Hollywood and
that's
Hollywood's
it. I
problem.
mean, it's Hollywood's prejudice really towards their own. It's their protectionist attitude towards American films that really means that Asian films don't get the publicity. But for me, Dredd's lack of ambition means that now there is a risk that we won't see the Dredd that we really want to see, because people will watch that film, they'll go, well, it was okay, but it wasn't really what I wanted to see from
that's
Dredd.
the funny thing.
It's not going to get me excited about the Dredd universe.
America will blockade Asian films, and Asia will blockade American films, and these films will slip through the cracks, and they will get bigger cult followings. I have to say, I am a fan of Dredd and The Raid now. Both films I would love to buy on DVD and just have them there. And if somebody said, I want to watch a film, I'd be like, just watch them both. It doesn't matter. You get to the end of Dredd and be like, wow, I'm going to watch The Raid now. And then at the end of The Raid, you're like, they're the same, but that guy did take a beating. He just beat the crap out of that other guy using his fists. They're both very good.
And that's the other thing, like the bad guys, really. Like those are the other half of the film.
Oh.
And there's the bad guys in The Raid, and there's the bad girl in Dredd.
Both bosses are so very much alike, living in their little towers, just watching everything that's going on.
With their security cameras.
With their security cameras.
But again, the contrast between the bad guys is really a nugget which demonstrates the contrast between both films, because the bad girl in Dredd,
Lena Headey,
really was she's a very theatrical bad girl, very kind of like, for me she wasn't that believable, she wasn't
very
that
believable. I mean, she's the queen from Sparta, from 300.
And Dredd didn't really go into the psychology behind the bad people in Dredd. Whereas in The Raid, it had moments of consideration as to how they think, why they do the things they do.
Well,
the one little guy.
Films, they're living in these tenement blocks and being owned by these bosses.
By these gangs, by crime.
Even the innocent people in both films, even the innocent people who had nothing to do with the gangs
Or afraid of the police, of corruption.
Afraid of the corrupt police, afraid of the gangs. They hide out in their houses and they still get taken out. You know, and in both films you have the henchmen, basically. They're just cannon fodder. I mean, obviously you were going to say...
In Dredd, they're all cannon fodder in Dredd, and then you get to the moment with the final boss, and for me, that was a bit of a disappointment the way that panned out. But yeah, because it was just... Whereas with the Raid, you had this huge sense of drama with almost like a sequence of sub-bosses until you get to the final huge, big duel-off with the main, like, the really hard dude.
Mad Dog.
The Mad Dog. I believe that little guy that plays that sort of the baddest ass in the film. I think he's the lead choreographer, and he really does save the big epic battle for himself.
Well, like I said,
but the drama around that scene and the way that finishes is so satisfying.
I've seen that kind of scene so many times before. It seems like a lot of Asian films, they build up until you go up against the sub boss, who is harder than the boss, but just doesn't want to be in charge. And they have these 5-10 minute long battle sequences, which are brilliantly done. And ultimately, the sub boss is dead. I've seen it, and
they all follow the same pattern of storytelling, but the biggest thing is how they tell the story.
Yes,
and that's what makes it memorable. That's what makes you want to go and revisit it and rewatch it, because you want to see that story play out again.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that you know how it's going to end. It matters how you get there. And for both films, I think they're a nice, entertaining journey through some action-orientated sequences with two different types of contrasting heroes, if you will.
They're definitely guy films. No shadow of doubt.
That may be a little bit sexist, but
I'm not trying to be sexist, but I would not take these films home to my wife and sit her down and be like, let's watch Dredd, now watch The Raid, because I know halfway, 10-15 minutes into Judge Dredd, she'd be like, I'm not watching any more of this.
It's definitely orientated towards the male market.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a girl and you're watching this and you want to see some guys beating the crap out of each other and shooting the crap out of each other, watch these films, because they pull up, like we said, Dredd has the guns, The Raid has the martial arts.
A bit more humour as well.
Well, yeah,
Dredd has quite a few comical moments in there to lighten the tension a little bit, whereas The Raid tonally just keeps getting further and further down.
Really? Did you not find some comedy in the choreography? Because there were quite a few bits.
Other than laughing out loud at the violence being so extreme, the scene that you highlighted when that guy gets taken out.
Story of Ricky all over again.
Watch that on a loop, just like
And every time I'm like,
ding! Well, that's it. I mean, there is a lot more comedy in Dredd, because we're following the Dredd character. Yeah. In The Raid, we're following him, the Rama, but we're following his story to try and get out. You know, and every time he thinks about his wife and his unborn son and his partners, you can't really find that funny. You just have to. You understand the realism behind it of a cop in a desperate situation, and he just wants to go home.
Yeah. And that's the drive.
Yeah. You don't get that from Dredd, because after Dredd finishes, he's just going to go to another block and blow away 400 other people. I am the law.
So, favourite or worst scenes from either movie?
I'll go first.
You go first, Geoff.
For me, my favourite scene in Dredd is any of the slow-mo sparkly bits, because they were, the best bit of cinematography in the film, and the minigun. Yeah. That's the most exciting, most vividly entertaining bit in the film. The Raid, there are a sequence of ways in which people get off, death sequences.
Get off.
Which I'm not going to go into any details because the joy is just seeing it for yourself and just being like, wow, how did they do that? And like, oh, just not seeing it coming. It's just so good.
He likes this film.
There's a lot of sequences of I could pick any one of those that are particularly good, and then there's the final boss fight, which for me is a classic case of real drama. And like the way the music crescendos up towards the end of the battle, and it had all the drama of the Matrix fights. But instead of having CGI cinematography, it was like boom, realistic, nitty gritty in your face.
Camera on rails, just following them all the way through.
Yeah, and you could pick any one of those scenes where you've got the camera running alongside, and some crazy bonkers action scene, which just ends up in like 1 or 5 or 10 people being killed. And it's hard to distinguish which is my favourite because I enjoyed every one.
Well, I mean, my favourite scene in The Raid is the one I already mentioned earlier. It's the scene, obviously, where they're going to breach that door and all the guys are hiding at the top. That, for me, was the favourite scene.
Yeah.
For Dredd, my favourite scene is the one where it's basically a special effect. It's when he changes his ammo on his gun to the incendiary. And when he fires that incendiary shot and just takes out near enough a whole floor.
15, 20 people.
And,
just like,
but it's just... yeah.
Incendiary.
And but it's then when he gets on the intercom afterwards, and then he pretty much tells them, "I am the Lord." And that's the moment. That's the point where I'm like, "Yeah, go get him, Dredd! Get him!"
So which would you choose? Do you have a preference?
Well, see, that's the thing. I mean, with my favourite scenes, I mean, Dredd. I love Dredd, and like we said already, I kind of love the Stallone Dredd. I can't look at Judge Dredd with his helmet on without thinking that's Sly Stallone back there. But I mean, in Dredd, my favourite scene has to be, not giving too much away, but it's the interrogation scene between Anderson and the black guy that they've arrested. That for myself, just brought it, like I said, another little futuristic nod to Dredd.
The man who murdered the people in the atrium.
You sure?
99%.
Can't execute a perp on 99%. Save me a lot of paperwork if you just confess right now.
In The Raid, so many good fight sequences. But I like... See, I'm going to go with something really small and just say the sequence where they take out the cops and seal the building down. That was a lot better done than Dredd. Mm-hmm. I got a massive Assault from Precinct 13 feel for that, because he just made that phone call, everybody got into position, and then bang bang bang, the police are in the deep shit. But at the same time, both films I can't choose. Both of them are very much on par for me. I would happily buy both of them in a double box set and just hand them out to people. Watch both these films. If you're watching The Raid, go back and look at some other Asian films if you haven't seen them. Some of the Jackie Chan, Jet Li, Chow Yun-fat movies. They paved the way for a film like The Raid, and The Raid will pave the way for films like this in the future. And with Dredd, I'm the law. He's Judge Dredd. You can't beat him.
Well, for me, I think Dredd was an okay film. I'm hoping to see more from the 2000 AD universe. If they've got the ambition and they're not afraid off the back of this film to go on and do great things with Dredd, maybe I'll have more affection for the Dredd film later.
Yeah.
But for me, between the two, The Raid is really the superior film in terms of excitement, and I get excited about watching The Raid again, whereas with Dredd I'm like, whatever.
You can shoot anybody. This guy beats him up with his hands.
Yeah. So I mean, but that's really for me the contrast is I want to watch The Raid again and again and again, whereas Dredd I'm like, well, if it's on, it's on, whatever.
Well, to contrast you, Geoff, I feel the exact same way, but in reverse. I'm not going to be too fussed to watch The Raid again.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that it does have some fantastic martial arts sequences, I cannot take that away from the film. It's just its storytelling isn't quite as enduring, or it doesn't pull me into the film as much as Dredd did. The mission in Dredd was so much simpler and easier to follow. It meant I didn't have to think too much, and I could just sort of take in the details that they had painted in this universe. Just the details of the backgrounds, the sets, the characters. As simple as it was, the film felt like it was in and out and over in less than an hour. Whereas for me, The Raid dragged on a little bit, where after the action sequences there'd be bits of dialogue that just didn't move the film on a little bit, whereas Dredd just kept it going, and it just kept building the adrenaline and the action all the way to the climax, whereas The Raid for me kind of wavers a little bit. That's why I would recommend Dredd more so, but then I'm also biased because I love science fiction, and it is a shame that the sci-fi world of Dredd wasn't explored fully, and I'd love them to come back and explore not just Dredd but the 2000 AD, the rest of the universe as well.
That's what it's all about.
So it's basically just an appetizer for what could be more.
Yeah.
And so for me, I fall on Dredd's side on this one, but I am still impressed by The Raid because I wasn't too fussed to see it before watching it. So I can honestly now say you should, if you're an action hound, you like these sort of films, watch both. Just watch Dredd first.
Well, that is a big problem, isn't it? The realism in The Raid was brilliantly done, but where we see three guys beat the crap out of each other in a room for 10-15 minutes.
How do they walk away from those fights?
At least in Dredd you see the pain.
They take a punch, they go down.
when Dredd is being chased by that minigun, you see the fear and pain on his face.
His chin.
Just in his chin. that he is going to die. So that's it. The films are very much like that, but then very much very far apart.